My name is Christine Theodoropoulos. I'm the head of the Department of Architecture, and on behalf of our faculty, students, and staff, I am very pleased to welcome you to this evening's lecture. Before I introduce the speaker, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Pietro Belluschi Distinguished Visiting Professorship in Architectural Design. It was created at the School of Architecture and Allied Arts in 1993 as a perpetually endowed fund to foster education in architectural design and celebrate the memory of Pietro Belluschi. We are very grateful to the Belluschi family for their generosity in establishing our Belluschi Endowment. I don't believe any of the family are here, but they will be joining you in Portland to hear your talk over there. The architects in our audience know Belluschi's work and his story quite well, but for our new students and guests, I just mention a few highlights. Pietro Belluschi was one of the most notable architects in Oregon. He was renowned for establishing a Northwest regional style as well as modern innovations. He was born in Ancona, Italy in 1899 and trained as an engineer in both the University of Rome and at Cornell University, immigrating to the United States in 1923. After working as a mining engineer, he joined the Portland, Oregon-based architecture firm of A.E. Doyle, and he became the firm's leading designer in 1927 when he was just 28 years old. From 1951 to 1965, Belluschi was the Dean of Architecture and Planning at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and in his 50 years of practice, both in Oregon and Massachusetts, he designed over 1,000 buildings, including several commercial buildings in the evolving international style, such as the Equitable Building in Portland, which is considered to be the first glass curtain wall building in the United States. But his domestic and religious work showed a preference for regional traditions and native materials. They had a very different quality. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing the 16th person to hold the Belluschi Professorship and the very first who is an alumnus of our architecture program here at the U of O. And like Belluschi, he is someone who is deeply passionate about regional and native traditions. Johnpaul Jones earned his Bachelor of Architecture degree from the U of O in 1967. He has a distinguished 40-year career as an architect and founding partner of the Seattle-based firm Jones & Jones. Jones' design philosophy emerged with his Choctaw Cherokee ancestors, and it connects him to the natural world, the animal world, the spirit world, and the human world. And he is spending fall term with us teaching a design studio and a seminar where students are exploring these principles by examining indigenous architectural traditions and considering how to apply the lessons learned to contemporary design practice. He's a recipient of a long, long list of professional honors in recognition of his designs of cultural centers and museums for Native American tribes, the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, and groundbreaking work designing humane and appropriate landscapes for animals in our nation's zoos. He also holds the Ellis F. Lawrence Medal from our School of Architecture and Allied Arts and the Distinguished Service Award from the University of Oregon. His talk this evening is titled, "The Frog Does Not Drink Up the Pond in Which It Lives." Please join me in welcoming Johnpaul Jones.
First of all, I want to thank the university for the honor of being designated a recipient of the Pietro Belluschi Award. When I was a student here it was really great to be able to walk on the south side of the Pioneer Cemetery and see one of Belluschi's churches, and be able to go inside. And it was, it was a wonderful experience for a young, learning architectural students here to be able to do that. And so I've always was interested in his work, and I was always interested in the span of time that he practiced. And I haven't been practicing that long yet, but I hope to keep going and be active in the design field in every area I possibly can. And I'll start this in. What I was saying, well, what do you want to know about what I've been doing? Because last year I came and I talked about indigenous design, and that's a big part of my life. But it was like, so, well, talk a little bit about how you use those same ideas and principles in non-native projects. And that's what I thought I would try to do tonight, is just go into like about 4 of them in real detail for you and show how those principles of the natural world, there's a lot of things in that world, the animal world, the spirit world, and the human world, that those things that were taught to me as a young man from my Native American heritage that I have applied in design. And so I want to talk a little bit about those kind of things that can be applied to non-native projects, because that's what our class design studio is doing, is thinking, how can you take those things and apply them to all design problems you're confronted with the rest of your life? And I found them very helpful, and so is my staff. And I was very lucky to be here at the time. I went to school here in the 60s, which was a riotous time in this country, and it was a riotous time on this campus. And but it was a valuable time where we questioned everything in our life. We questioned about what we ate. We questioned how we raised our kids. We questioned how our government functioned. We questioned the environment. Why was it all messy and all that? And it led to, later on, people all across the country went on to become senators and important people in their community. And we've got Clean Water Acts, and we've got Clean Air Acts now that we didn't have before. And it all came out of that negative Vietnam era. It was pretty interesting. And but it's even stronger nowadays. And so I thought, well, the frog really has influenced a lot of my projects. It's drawn me into a lot of projects, and it influences my life, and it's a very strong spirit in the Northwest indigenous culture. And, let's see. This is that Icicle building that Pietro Belluschi. So it's interesting how he was able to take his experience in engineering and really apply it in architectural design, and it's still a wonderful building in Portland. But it was really great how he used his talent for materials and simple forms and simple shapes to really create emotion in human beings. And I really caught on to that real early, visiting a number of his projects. And then this is the San Francisco Cathedral project. And so I remember one thing out of this was light, and how important light was. Colored light, all kinds of light, and how it can really kind of create a wonderful spiritual feeling in you. And I try to put it in everything I do. Things that are not churches and all that. So before I start, it was also suggested that your firm does a lot of different things. And I wanted to just show you a little range of that, because we're architects and landscape architects. And when I went to school here, you had to take landscape architecture, you had to take interior design, you had to take city planning, you had to do all that. as well as the art classes and the architectural classes. And so one of the things that was going on at that time was they were saying to architects, you gotta open up to the world. You can't just be in this castle all the time up there. You really had to open up. And so I had some great classes here in ceramics with great philosophical discussions, and great classes in city planning and landscape and interior design, as well as good architectural design. And so it opened my eyes to a lot of different things. It was the right place for me to come to and go to school. I had a scholarship to go to Berkeley. All I had to do was get in. But I didn't have a foreign language in high school and community college. And I had a scholarship sitting there, but I couldn't get in. I ended up, and I was certainly depressed by it for years, but when somebody told me about Oregon, I said, where's that? You know? And so I was working for an architectural company called Higgins and Root in Los Gatos, California. And they said, well, we're going to buy you a ticket to fly up to Eugene, Oregon, and you can see if you can get in. And so I got to fly on one of those DC airplanes that was not like this, but like this. And it stopped in, Red Bluff or Redding, stopped in Grants Pass or Medford, and then stopped in Eugene. I got off the plane, came over here and found out I could go to school here. And I didn't even talk to anybody ahead of time. I just walked through the school and I listened to what was going on in the arts and the architecture and all. I just listened to what they were doing. I said, that's where I want to go to school. And so then I went over to the admin and they said, well, if you can come up here during the summer and show that you can get, you've got good grades in college so far, in community college, but so I went through it. Went through the summer and got, I think, almost all A's, and because I was motivated. And then I was able to get into school, and I said, well, you've taken all these classes so you can cut your time down to less than 5 years. And I said, no, I want to go the full 5 years. I really want to get involved in it and really do it. And so it was a wonderful time in my life about learning and discovering a lot of things about myself. And that discussion that went about is that architects need to broaden their fields more. They need to broaden their practices more. So I want to show you some of the things we do. If you've ever been in downtown Denver, the historic part was wiped out by urban renewal. And they're trying to rebuild their city. They're trying to make it come alive again. And they had some assets of the river that runs through town, and they had an area where that was just a mess. They'd cleared everything out. Nothing had been built there. And they said, we want to have a big community park like Grand Central Park in New York, a place where people can go and celebrate and do things. And so this is the Denver Commons. And I had a great time working on the design of this. Everything, landscape, buildings, layout, the whole thing. It was a great process. And see that little bump in the middle of that up there? That's a Native American touch put into it. And you can go up there on the top of that, and you can lay there, and you can just, all you see is the Rocky Mountains and the sky and all around. It's got the cardinal directions and the equinoxes marked up there. And it's a place that connects you to something bigger. And but it's used very strongly by the community to in their redevelopment and of just getting neighborhoods and people back downtown and living and all that. And so it was the park. So that's one kind of thing we do is parks. And animals. I hated zoos when I was young and got out of school and had 2 kids. And I'd go to the zoo at Woodland Park in Seattle, and they'd be in a wagon because it was a long walk through the zoo. And they'd be sitting there in the wagon, and I'd go around and I went, oh, man, this is terrible. What are we doing? And, here's the gorilla, and he comes over to the glass and takes some of his poop and smears it all over the glass. And I look at their outside area at the gorillas, and it's like he's got a beer keg to throw around and a tire swing. And he's inside this barred cage. And what am I learning from any of that? And what am I doing as a human being holding that animal in captivity like that? And so when we had our first chance to be involved in zoo design, it was in Seattle, we started like, how can we bring things that we bring to ourselves, good places to be, how we can give them the habitat that's like they're there, because it's the only reason to hold them. They got to be representatives of their people, their culture, their all that. And so why not give them a place where they can act natural and tell you a lot about themselves and how they've adapted to difficult things in the world. So we started that in Seattle. Real simple thing to do. And it consumed a big part of my life for probably 15, 18 years. And I loved it. I was good at it, and I really loved it. And I learned a lot about all kinds of animals and helping them all over the world. And we still do some of that in our firm. But we spawned 3 other firms around the country that broke off from us, and they do it a lot all over the place. So it was a wonderful thing to start, and it's happening everywhere. And so even if you go to Portland Zoo, you'll see everybody's trying to do things that really teach you and your kids all about the world around them and the animal. And this is at the Detroit Zoo, and you can walk through the polar bears, and they're swimming right above you. Roads. We got to have roads to get from point A to point B and all that sort of stuff. But my partner, Grant Jones, he said roads help stitch back the environment. I always thought roads went cut the environment in half, and he wrote a lot of papers about this, how it could really taking the designing a road and making it so that it respected, first of all, the environment that it was in. So it wasn't just a straight, like this green thing here, straight from point A to point B, that it really should respond to that tree, and it should respond to that wetlands, and it should respond to and it worked its way through. And when we first got started, it was in Lexington, Kentucky to Paris, Kentucky, I think it is. And for 20-something years, all the people in that community had held up the Kentucky State Highway people from putting this road through. They needed a 4-lane road. And somebody in the state read an article that we had written, and he said, let's bring these guys in. And so that led to us doing road work. And we still do some. We're doing some in Hawaii right now, on the big island of Hawaii. Right now it's on the windward side, where the small communities are being impacted by just the growth and the tourism and everything. And how do you allow those communities to still be there and still be able to move traffic through all of that and be respectful of the environment and culture and all of that? So we do a lot of that kind of work. Am I doing it right? There it is. Portland has a great Chinese garden. Boy, I recommend you go see that. It is really phenomenal. It's in downtown, I think it's the north end near the Pearl District in downtown Portland. Well, Seattle, most cities want to have Chinese garden. Seattle has a large Chinese community, and they want to have a Chinese garden there. And we worked for many, many years with to help plan and design the Chinese garden. But it's all about the Sichuan garden. We think of Sichuan hot food. Well, they have a style of garden that's a little more wilder, and it's not as formal as the one in Portland. It's a little more open and wilder, like fits into our climate and our environment a lot better. And this is just a picture of the first phase that they just opened to get going. We worked with the Chinese designers who could not speak English, and we could not speak Chinese. And we met over in our office talking about the design of this thing, because there was things that you can do. And we were trying to get across a point about something that was really important. And they were sitting on the other side of the table, and they all spoke in Chinese, and they spoke to the interpreter, and the interpreter spoke to me. And then our group, and then we responded and interpreted. It was taking hours, just taking hours. And so I looked across to the lady that was leading the design team of the Chinese, and I laid out a piece of paper, and I went, and she went, Oh! And we solved it by that, drawing. So the language of architects and the language of design is international. It's really phenomenal. And so that's what I think happened here to me. I discovered that and that are faster than computers. And it's pretty amazing what it'll do for you. And so we just finished a project that I'll show you a little later with the Japanese internment group. I do a lot of work with indigenous people. I love it. It's part of my heritage. This is in Palm Springs for the Agua Caliente people, the hot water people. And it's in downtown Palm Springs, and it's ready to get under construction, but the economy is not helping us right at this point, but it will. It'll be under construction hopefully within the year. And their philosophy of life and the way they translate it into their baskets, if you go to Palm Springs, they have a little small museum there right now. And they have right now, at this moment, running until Christmas, I think it is, they have a basket exhibit that the women showed their basketry. And those women were connected to the cosmos. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Their culture was connected that much, and they expressed it in their baskets. And when you see this exhibit, you'll go, oh my God, how could these primitive people make that kind of connection? It's phenomenal. But their approach to their baskets and to life was that it was always expanding outward. It's always expanding outward. And they wanted us to express that in the design. And so the spiral was something that you could really work with. And so if you've ever been in Minneapolis and you like to ride your bicycle, and this happens in a lot of communities, the old railroad lines that, because everything, the trains all went across the country, and those old railroad lines are a lot of times not being used. And we created this Cedar Lake Trail. And it's a bike trail, hiking trail, and it goes for miles through in the edge of Minneapolis. And it was just an abandoned railroad, a lot of railroad. So it was fun to be involved in that, in the design of that, and how do you lay that into the community and give people access. So we do those kind of things. A lot of that. It's a lot more varied than that at this point, too. I want to talk about these 4 native projects. That's an interesting photo, isn't it? The frog has a lot to do with this. And in indigenous design, frogs, I think, have a big place in their implementation. And in the Northwest, the frog spirit is really important. It's expressed in so many different ways. And we know the frog, we all know the frogs because that heralds in spring, right? They start singing, and we go out and we hear them all over the place. And but the frog is a creature of great importance in Northwest culture, not in mythology, but in their culture, and in their art and their culture. The frog spirit is a helper. It's a messenger to us. It's a harbinger of knowledge. It's associated with strength and dignity. And it's a link between our world and the spirit world. That slimy looking thing. The frog is dedicated to balance, healing, and guidance. Now, those are kind of interesting things to kind of think about, balance and healing and guidance. And the frog is a helper to humans in many, many different ways. Now, the 4 projects I'm going to show you have a lot of design in it, buildings, site, and all that sort of thing. And they've won awards. But the most important thing is that they're all dealing with frogs. The core of it is dealing with the frog environment. So the first one I want to show you is, this is in Seattle. It's over in Bellevue, south of Bellevue. And at the far top end, you can see the water and see a road going across. That's I-90. It goes all the way from Seattle to Philadelphia, 4-lane highway. Very busy, very noisy. The highway running along the left is 405, I think it is. It's very busy and noisy. And right in the middle of all that, you can see this huge, big area that's a wetlands. It's the largest wetlands that's close to the urban area in Seattle. It's the largest wetlands. It was like used for farming. It was used for, this is looking north, the other one was looking south. And that's the 405 is on the right here, and I-90 is on the lower left. And then at the top part is what's called Bellevue Way. And the edges could be used, you know. So there's a park and ride lot. Let's see if I can get that right there. That's a park and ride lot for buses. And then up at this north end, up in there is, and this is a picture of the north end right here. Look at all this development. All these things are on piers, and the ground sinks around them, and they have to come in and build it up every now and then, the parking lots and everything. And it's sinking because it's on an ancient, really ancient wetlands that was there. And so the Parks Department of Bellevue was fortunate to buy the whole thing, and they hired us to do a master plan. And as part of that master plan that we did 17 years ago, it didn't go anywhere for a long time. And the architectural design that we ended up working on has to do, it started right here. This is I-90. And it started right here in this little triangular piece next to the park and ride lot. And this is Bellevue Way going into Bellevue, and then other highways on the other side. Well, it started in that location because that was how you could get into the muck of life. You could go down there and then you could really see all this wetlands, and you could be involved in it. And I had ideas of sinking the building partly down in it so you could go down and look through a window and see all the stuff through glass and muck and the frogs and the plants, and then you could get all this interpretive information about it. It was an interpretive center. And so during the 15, 17 years before we got going on the new site up there, we helped build walkways through the wetlands. And let's see if there's another one. They're really neat. You know, people go out there, you can walk right through there. In the springtime, there's bugs, and it's a great place. People come from all over to walk through it. And there's boardwalk trails, and there's bridges, and you can see where not a lot of interpretive stuff on it, but it's just fun to go out and do that. You know, you feel like you're someplace else, but you're right there by downtown Bellevue in Seattle. And there's a slough that goes down through it. People are canoeing, doing this on it all the time. And see Bellevue on the, let's go back here. See Bellevue in the background back there. It's the second largest city now in Washington. And it's, you see that right in the background there. And it's just a wonderful place. And so that was the first site. Kind of slopey, went down to the muck and all that. And right next door was the big park and ride lot. And so some things happened in that 15 years. Light rail came about. Okay, so light rail was going to go right next to where the road's just on the left of that trail there. That road's going to have light rail, and it's going to be a more busy road. The park and ride wanted to expand. Okay, and lo and behold, you can't go down in the muck anymore because you have to be 50 feet or 25 feet or whatever setbacks from the wetland edge. And those are rules that all came into operation when we do that. So my site went from this big down to a small site to try to fit everything in. But the biggest problem was I-90. I-90 from about 4 o'clock until about 6 o'clock in the evening and early in the morning until about 9 o'clock was noisy. I-90 traffic, cars and buses and trucks. And I went out there and I walked on the site and I thought, man, Why do you want to do an environmental center here? It's so noisy. You can't teach all that stuff. But I walked down further in the site, and I walked behind a little building, and I stood behind this little small 10 by 10 building, and it was quiet all of a sudden. It was just absolutely quiet because that building cut off the sound from my 90. So I thought, okay, I can work with courtyards and things like that because that's what the environment's telling me. And so the first layout for this environmental education center, that was the first layout. And there's the muck. Oh, let's go back here. There's the muck down in here. We had to get out of it and move up onto the flatter part. This is the edge of the park and ride. This is the busy road is right here. And the first thing the code says, well, you got to, if you do this many places, you got to have 50 parking spots. And you got, boy, it just, there was no land left when we were done. It just really got gobbled up. And we did a design that looked kind of like this. I thought, well, on one side, the residents are all up there, and they look down, and they were like big voice in the neighborhood. They said, we don't want to look down at a bunch of roofs, So I thought, okay, we're going to do living roofs for two reasons. That'll help those people up there, and it will also slow down the runoff coming off the roof, like we're all taught about sustainable stuff, and slow it down, and then before it gets into the wetlands that they're trying to maintain out there. So that was the first pass with courtyards. Let's go back. See those yellow things? Those are courtyards. So you can get between everything and still see out. And then there was a new parks director that came on board. And he saw all the problems that we were seeing there on that site. And he says, I got an idea. I want to come over here and let's go over there and look at this site. And I had made friends with him when he first came in as the park director, and so he says, I got an idea. Let's go over and look at this other site. And it's up at the northeast corner, and there's no flat land. It's on a slope like this, big trees growing up through it. And we walked out on that site and stood there on the edge of it, and it was really beautiful, like this roadies and the big trees sticking up through it, and then he says, okay, now see this little farmhouse that we moved over here, which is right next to it. It was a little Dutch farmhouse, went up like this. He said the Pacific Science Center has been running an environmental education program in this house for 10 years. And it's a little house. And they run, hundreds of kids through this every year. And they have no place for office. They have all these kids, when they go down in the muck and do their programs that they go to gather stuff, they come back and they're all dirty. And they have to go in this little bathroom with one sink and get washed up. And so when I was there watching them, they bring out a little swimming pool, plastic swimming pool, and they fill it full of hot water and a little soap, and the kids wash up. And I said, God, we can solve that. As architects, we can solve that. And I learned that what they wanted to do was team up, because that's the thing nowadays, is that these public agencies, the only way they can get things done is to team up together. So the Pacific Science Center education program and the Bellevue Parks education program teamed up together to build this facility on this very difficult site. And I thought this was an interesting drawing for you to see. But way over here was a narrow strip of land that we could get some parking in. And then we could do a drop-off. There was a little flattish piece right here. And this is the house that's tucked in, that little Dutch house right here. The rest of all of this was treed with a lot of trees, very steep slope. But it was great views of the wetlands and great views out between the trees. And so those shapes that you saw, those green shapes that were kind of like this, I thought, boy, that might work to fit in between these trees. So first thing we did was document exactly where every one of those damn trees were. on a topo. We had it pinned down. And then we tried to, as we developed the program, we started looking at, okay, what do you need here? And they needed their building remodeled, the Dutch house. They needed 2 wet labs, and we took an old storage concrete block building and did a wet lab right there. And then they needed a small interpretive center for the Parks Department. They needed a multi-purpose room that they could use for lunching on those rainy Northwest days with all the kids. And then they needed toilets, and they needed a series of 4 classrooms. Okay, that's good. But what connected it all together was these decks, all of these decks that go between. It was all about decks and not so much about the architecture. So there's a little better understanding drawing of where the architectural things are, and you can get the idea of the parts and pieces that are a part of it. And they are tucked in between the trees. I couldn't put them on different levels because it all has to be ADA accessible. So we couldn't put elevators in and all that stuff. So there's a very steep site. So how do you get from this upper part down to this part down here? And right along in that corner there, we put, you can find these things. They're really great. They're vernacular things, they call them. They're on a slope. You get in them and set them, it takes you down. So we got it to stop at 2 levels. Cost about $85,000 to do it, but it solved a huge problem. We would have had ramps going like this on the entire site all through. There was no way to get elevators in or any of that. So this vernacular thing works well. And I watch kids go down it on wheelchairs, and they have a great time doing it. It's really fun. I had done a series of little sketches, for the other project at the other site, and it's really fun to do these little isometrics that you learn to do here in school, and those are really helpful for your clients to really get a quick look at it. And they're just hand done. Just take a few minutes, and then you put notes on them, and when we show up to them, we blow each one of them up real big so they can get in on it. And I just wanted to show you that this was some of the initial drawings that went into it, and then ultimately, they want a perspective of some kind, and I'll just show you that one there. I like this part, though, which is just the geometry of it. I'm really fascinated by just the geometry of it. Here's the deck that runs right between, and I'll show you a picture of this part of the deck in just a minute. And then here's the decks for when you arrive. There's some covered deck because it rains a lot in Seattle. That's the interpretive center. Here's some little toilets off to the side. And one of the first things we did was said, when you arrive at this place and you get out of your car, we want you to see the environment, because that's what it's all about. We want you to see it. The architecture's secondary. It's got to be important. It's got to be good, but it's secondary. It's that environment. Those frogs, we want you to see them out there, and then you go from there. And so that's what these shapes were doing. They were responding to the views, because the views were over here, and that's where the big windows are, is out that way. And then there's a few other windows in other locations, but that big windows, I'll show you at the end what they look like. But and then those decks in between, and there's one of the decks. So it's just a narrow slice, because I just was fascinated by how you can, when I took structures here, that was one of the things that it was fun for me to deal with, and one of the things we did about was cantilevers. How do you deal with cantilevers? And if you want to cantilever out from something, boy, that's going to be something really strong. But if you can take something part way there and go down and anchor it, you can get out there pretty easily. And that's what this thing is right here. That's a support for that walking out. And my wife, who doesn't like high places, had to hold her hand walking out there, because it's really neat. But it had to keep kids from getting killed and falling off too. So we had a lot of things we had to solve. But the biggest problem was we didn't want to come into the site with big equipment and do pile driving or to auger or do all that. So we used the micro piles. They're made out of, they're metal and they're like about that big. And they bring in this little thing that's about this size right here, and they set it on, they pound it in. It's a little small thing they can move around. So they did very little damage to the site because we thought it was really important to maintain that site. So, and this is the kind of views you get out of there into the wetlands. And especially in the wintertime, there's not much leaves on the big leaf maples and that there. And in the wintertime or the summertime when it's hot in Seattle, like 80 degrees, people are hot, our engineers were able to take advantage of the heating and cooling by taking advantage of those trees. Some were evergreens and some were deciduous. And so there's that deck going out there along that trail. And the site was the site. You can see it going up right here. It's going up pretty steep, and there's kind of between the buildings. And I just wanted you to be able to see underneath how the buildings are all supported underneath. And then there's these decks, and that's from down on the trail looking up. And the other thing I wanted to do was to stick with this simple form, because the simpler it is, the simpler it will be for the contractor, because he's got to work out there on those high spaces with all his carpenters and metal guys and put the windows in, put the siding on, electrical. So keep the form simple. Like I said in my design or studio class, simple, simple, simple. Culture, culture, culture. The two things I wanted them to remember. But keeping it simple is really the best solution to it. Also, the fire department says you got to have more than one way to get out of here in case something happens, an earthquake or a fire or whatever. So that stair, we got them talked into having a stair that brings people down and they get on that trail. And we were able to solve that exiting that way on it. So simple forms, responding to what the government tells you to do, and then, first of all, responding to the environment. And before that, giving constant references to the frogs and the environment out there, because that's what the whole place teaches about. And that's what the architecture has to respond to and teach about. So under the cover of the space where you can get into where we used wood to warm it up, and but we used the metal because it was lightweight. Because we had to keep the structures light because they were setting up on top of this thing. So this is a Seattle Honor Award, top honor award that they give, and it was awarded a Gold Leads project. Yeah, for a lot of different reasons, and I'll get into some of that too. There's a tree house. It's down here. You can get up in the tree house. More adults go up in it than kids do, but it's the kids can go down there and supervise. But see these decks, and then stairs down. But see these decks. That's what I talk about when I say the human world is a transfer of knowledge. We transfer things to other people, or kids and adults. And so putting places like this where you can just sit down with kids and look at these plants and talk with them and do that. They don't have to do it just in the classroom. We need to bring that out into the hallways, the passageways, the decks, and all that. That's because that's where a lot of education takes place. So we tried to do that as much as we could. There's the tree house, a little close-up of the tree house, and they can go up there. And then another picture of that deck walking out, the one deck that goes way out. And water. So the water comes off the roof and then runs along this runnel right here, and comes off that one and runs along the runnel, and then it runs down, and then it goes through a bioswale that's on a slope going down, and then gets cleaned up a little bit, and it goes into the wetlands. And so we tried to do that in a number of places just to have that illustrated version of what water does and what's really important. But the big idea is that wetlands balance our environment. Okay? Frogs are part of that, but the wetlands balance our environment. we've lost a lot of wetlands, and we got to maintain what we have left, and we got to increase them wherever we can, and so that's the big story about this place is about wetlands and what they do. They clean water. They provide a lot of things, animal habitats and beauty. All the materials were sustainable, had been recycled, or had high sustainable material reuse, and lots of light. We fill the place with light because we need light in the Northwest, and then you don't have to turn the lights on so much, electric lights. I always like that picture. You know, there's a family and they're talking to their kids and they're looking out at the environment and doing that. And so it's a place for people to learn about the environments. And I love to walk through there. I've done it, haven't done it lately, but last time I walked through in the spring and evening, the frogs drive you nuts. They're so loud. They're wonderful. The tree frogs in the Northwest are absolutely wonderful. So that's one. I showed a little bit of this last time, but I thought I wanted to show it again because it's tied to closer to you. It's on the Columbia River. It's Fort Vancouver, the first civilized place in the Northwest, outside of Athens. You know, so I mean, it is pretty interesting that this was bigger than Portland. I mean, this was where all the pioneer people were trying to get to, like the Willamette Valley, but they came here. And why was this fort there? Well, it was because of that was where all the native people gathered to trade. I don't know the exact reasons why they were there at that spot, but it was one of the reasons. If you get up in the air and you look down at the Columbia River, you'll see these flattish areas that come out from the slopes. And there are flat areas that probably were floodplains that got flooded at certain times and then build up. And those were unique environments with lots of camas and other deer went down into it. There was a lot of them. They were unique. And if you got up in the air and looked down from like the beginning of the Columbia Gorge and all the way down to the mouth, you'll see these places. And that's where was a flat place that you could be, and that's where Indian people gathered and camped. And it also was a place where the Klickitat Trail came across from eastern Washington. They came across the mountains and the trading place. And up and down the Columbia River, this was a major trading place that took place. So that's why the Hudson Bay Company started the fort there, because that was where other humans were and they were trading. So, hey, better be right there. And so that was a trading place. Later on, it became a major fort, and that's what this part is right here. It's a restoration of it. It was a major fort, and it grew over years, and Dwight Eisenhower was stationed there. MacArthur was there. All of them stayed at this place and were there. And they were mainly there to control the native people. But there was a pretty interesting village that was there, made up of Hawaiians and native people and other people from the Pacific Rim, and it was a wonderful place. And then over time, and you could walk right down to the Columbia River, because that was the highway, Columbia River. And over time, the shoreline changed. The shoreline changed here. It changed by the railroad coming in, and that's this little narrow thing right here. That's the Transcontinental Railroad. It comes all the way from the East Coast, and that's a busy railroad. That's a train every 10 minutes now on it, and it had to be elevated because of the floodplain. So it's elevated about 15 to 18 feet in the air, and so. When they built it, they put a few underpasses in. I think one of them's right here. Then they put one down further down this way. There's a couple of them down there. But other than that, it was a barrier that was put in. And then a highway was put in, which is that one, the 4-lane highway that goes east towards Camas and up the Columbia. And that was put in off I-5, which comes across here. And then the waterfront was all boogered up with restaurants and commercial development and riprap. And then during the Second World War, there was all kinds of shipbuilding. Kaiser built concrete ships here and just downriver a little bit, and they were thousands of people went to work. So it was a big thing that changed the whole river character. And I'm going to go back just one more there. They lost their connection. And right now, if somebody comes in on a canoe, because the Indian people always come here for an event once or twice a year because of the importance of the place, and there was a lot of people held in captivity here that they want to honor. They come in here, and then they have to walk up this way and go around and go over the ceiling and come around through Vancouver and come in this way. It's about 4 miles, 3 to 4 miles. That's the only way they can get there right now because of all those barriers that were put there. So for years, the National Park Service and the city have been talking about, let's put a overpass, and that was what they were, in the master plan that was done and we had done for the park, it showed this thing, chain link fence, and you get on it cheap, you get on one side or the other. But then you have to go up this circular thing and come down a circular thing on the other side. And Maya, Lynn, and myself were looking at we worked on 7 different projects that she's designed for on the Columbia area, and she's working on the last one right now. We're helping her with it, Celilo Falls. But her and I went over there and I said, boy, it'd be really easy just to cut and cover. You know what that is for the freeway? Dig down and cover it over. And the state highway people said, no way, there's too much water down there. We'd have to be pumping all the time. And so then there was other thoughts about what to do. And so I said, well, why don't we do something that would be something like a land bridge? And everybody said, what? And I said, why don't we grab the land and pull it up and over and down on the other side? Literally like a carpet, just pull it up and over. And why don't we make it a reconnecting place? So it's reconnecting immediately between the fort and the riverfront. It's reconnecting the historicness of how important this place was. And a circle's a really good representation of the reconnecting. So why don't we design, this is a sketch that I did for them in the discussion, that why don't we do something that is like, here's where the bridge started over here, and you come across and come down on the other side. And so then we spent months trying to figure out how do you get it between the railroad and the highway, and how do you get it to the underpass that's there, and how do you do all that? How wide should it be? And what should you see when you're up there? There's a couple of viewing things. But here you can view and see the land and the fort, and then over here you can view and see the river. And then some of the staff and some of the engineers said, well, why don't you just build one of these big geometric bridges like everybody's doing nowadays? And it's really wonderful. And I love those. But you go down there and there's things like that sticking up all over the place, It's too much. It needs to be cut back and less of that done. And so that's why this idea of the land bridge became really important. Now, this is a little different angle. The fort's on this side. That's the edge of the fort. And you come over, and that's the circle that's there, and you come down between the railroad tracks and the highway, and then you go under the apple, by the apple trees and under, and then you get to the waterfront, and then we take the waterfront, and right now it's steep like this with riprap, and why don't we lay it back and create a beach so they can bring canoes up, and then they can walk across and do all that. And remember all those shipbuilding things that we're doing? They were down this way. They're all now condos and apartments, and people look out, and they jog along here, and they wanted some way to get up and over and jog around the fort and come back and ride their bike instead of having to get up in the traffic and pedal through all the traffic. So this thing has to serve a lot of functions, not just the native one that was there, but the one that the community. And so then, how wide should it be, and what should the path go down through it, and what should you put up there, and what should it do? And these are just thinking stuff, what we should all do and use in what we do. And it was really fun to just kind of do that. And it got more elaborate as we went along. And then ultimately, we did a sketch of it. And the fort's over here. And you have to get up to come over. And there's one viewing point of the land. Here's the other viewing point to the river. And then you have to come all the way down to get to this point right here to get under the railroad tracks, because the railroad people won't respond to you in any way. They're real tough. And we squeezed it through and got them working with us. But this is an old Applegate Park that's right there. And so the circle is here. And then this thing is 40 feet wide with lots of plants on either side, so you don't get impacted by the cars so much. And there's where it's located. There's the fort up there in that corner, right-hand corner. And this is where all the village was, and the National Park Service wants to restore all of that. And but the trail comes across, and you can go up and over and come down between and then come out onto the waterfront. And it's part of the project that we did. And that's what it looks like right now. I really love this project. It's so much fun. And it's not a building, but it is a structure. And it's something that an architect can do just as well as a landscape architect. And so the other thing that's interesting is that all the water on the top is collected and then reused in the irrigation of it. So there it is. There's the highway. There's the railroad. There's I-5. And they're going to be going across that pretty soon. And this is how it comes and gets people connected to both sides. And it's used regularly. A lot of things happen along it. Trellises, interpretive information, boardwalks that start in one spot and then end, and you wonder what that is. But if you read this panel down there, that's where Mud Creek came out of Mud Lake, used to be. So we made a wetlands right there in that one spot, so there can be some memory to what was there. We used the words. We talked to the various tribes in the Chinookan area, Chinookan people, the Columbia people, and for the word land, they gave us their word for land, and we did it in their language, and we did some designs, some basket patterns, some interpretive stuff in those viewing places. And then in other places we talked about the World War and the things that happened there, from shipbuilding to spruce mills and all that sort of thing. So, and then Lillian Pitt, who's a wonderful artist that lives in Portland, she helped with doing the artwork for the project, and that's one of her paddles and some of the other things that she worked on with us. And then what I like about it is all native plants, and they're finding their way right now. Some of them are doing well and some are struggling, but they're coming. And so it's all about the native plants that used to be there in that kind of land, that area. And then that's where the water comes and circulates down. And that's what happened when it opened, the day opened. Look at all those people. It was wonderful. People really enjoyed themselves because they really wanted this, And it's great to be an architect involved in this kind of thing and do design. So, this one is about a music center, and it's at a place called Icicle Canyon and Sleeping Lady, and so you can see Sleeping Lady up here. There she is. There's her breast, and that's her legs go down. This is Icicle Creek, and it's at a place called Sleeping Lady Mountain Retreat Center that we did for an elderly lady that was very concerned about the environment, and it's a recycle of a whole bunch of things and made into an important place in the Northwest. And this is Sleeping Lady all through here, all of these red things right here. And then Icicle Music Center is this stuff right here. That's what I want to talk about with you. Because frogs are music to my ears. And one of the main structures was this music center that would hold about 150 to 200 people. And then it also had to have a number of other things that were small practice rooms like there's just 7 or 8 of them, and then it had to have ensemble practice areas, and then it had to have lodging for the visiting scholars or musicians and the students that come, and then it had to have a little administration center, and that's a recycle of an old house that used to be way over here. I moved it over to this site. And Sleeping Lady is all about healthful living and healthful food and respect of the environment, and it's also about frogs. I got to tell you this little story. There's a little, right at the entrance of we remodeled buildings, there's a pond that's about 12 feet by 6 feet that we made, and it's filled with water, and there's dragonflies and frogs croaking all spring and summer there. It's really a wonderful thing. And that's where you walk in to get your luggage and do all that stuff. And somebody came to me and said, I don't know what it is about Sleeping Lady, but there's something that just makes me feel so good, And so I started talking to him, and it was just hearing those frogs and seeing those dragonflies and eating the healthy food that they have in their garden there. And they go over there to solve problems that we have in our society, everything from the physical part to the political part, and it's a place that really helps people, it helps humans, and water elements go right through where people are staying, so you can hear the frogs in your sleeping units, the cabins that you stay in, and they come right into the courtyards. So now, Icicle Music Center is next to that, and music is a big part of all that good, healthful living and solving problems. And I really enjoyed doing this project, and especially that music center right there. And one of the first things I talked to was with the acoustical consultant, and first thing he told me was don't do any parallel walls. Vertical, horizontal, anything. Don't do any parallel walls. Make them all non-parallel to each other. And even the back wall, he said, and that'll get you on the right course. But we went into it a lot more than that. That's what led to the shape that you see here, because this is the music hall. They have an entry, other things in the back, and then down here they have a warm-up for recital space for the individuals that do that. And it's a very simple place. There's a model. There's a model of it to just give you some kind of a clue of it. And that's what it kind of looks like. There's Sleeping Lady Canyon, Icicle Canyon. This is over at the entrance. And it looks kind of skinny and narrow there, but it's because of the photograph. And there it is again, right there, looking up into the mountains. And then these are some of the cabins and that people get to stay in, and they have different things that they do. They're all centered around this giant rock and these trees, and people look into the trees and those rocks. It's really kind of a wonderful thing. And then in the wintertime, it snows a lot over there. And then these are the small little practice rooms where one person can get in, and there's a piano in there. And I took each one of them, and they have a big window on the back side that fills the hole from wall to wall, and you look out. And so some of them just look at rocks and snow, and some look at great views, and some look at trees and all that. And it inspires the musicians to really do great things. So our work as designers can really affect that kind of thing quite a bit. And then this is that looks kind of narrow, but it's sufficient for people to come into kind of an entrance welcome before they go inside, and they can get coffee and kind of things there. And then the music hall itself is, let me show you, there was a great window that looks out, and I'll show you a better view of that in a minute. But the musicians can get on a little portable stage, or they can be on flat surface with all the audience. And so it has some flexibility of how they can arrange it. If they want to do certain kind of music, they move the stage around, because the space responds differently to the different kinds of instruments they're using. And so one wall is tuned to different kinds of music sounds. It's that whole looks like shells, but it's really tuned to a certain sound thing and then it has these great little glass pieces where light shines in through, as well as on the big window. And people can sit there, and I've sat there many times, and you sit there and the musicians are playing, and you're looking out the big window, and the clouds are going, and the music's going right with the clouds. And the birds are humming, the swallows are going around, and they're going with the music, and then then you look up and see Sleeping Lady Mountains, and then you look up and you see deer wandering through, and you're listening to this great music, and it really is it's a wonderful thing. You're not in a space like this. You're really connected to the environment and the whole thing. And it's people then go out and stay in their places that are by wetland ponds and irrigation ditches and all that. And so it's really a place that's connected to a lot of different things, and it has technically good sounds, and that's the window that looks out. Kind of fun composing that. And then the client had lots of this old glass that she couldn't figure out what to do with. And we looked into it, and it was that glass that was made in like Kentucky or North Carolina, that special glass. It's very beautiful stuff that you can't even find nowadays. So we took them and just mounted it in just various places, all on that. So when you sit there, it's on the side windows, small openings, and it's in the big window too. And it's really nice to have that. That's Pietro taught me that. Use color. I use that a lot. Okay, one more, and then another short one after that. Do you know much about the Japanese internment? A lot of people don't know. I didn't know much about it, but it relates to my ancestry in the native world, where we were moved unwillingly to another location. And at the Second World War, everybody after Pearl Harbor, was very concerned about the Asians along the coast, and especially the Japanese. And on Bainbridge Island, there was a large Japanese community where I live. And just down the road from where our kids grew up, there was where they tested something. Before they moved all the Japanese off the West Coast and moved them to detention camps, they tested something, and they wanted to make sure it would work. So they chose Bainbridge Island because it had like almost 300 Japanese people that lived there a long time. And they said, okay, order came, you have to pack up. You have 5 days or 6 days or something. You have to sell everything. All you can take is a suitcase. And before they did that, they walked into, the FBI showed up and went into houses and said, knocked on the door, and you're sitting down with your family, and you opened the door, and they said, you're under arrest. They took most of the men away. And they wouldn't explain anything about why, and they left a lot of the elders and the women there by themselves with their kids. And so it was a very tense time for the government and for the people. And the government didn't trust the local army guys because they might have grown up with these other Japanese kids. So they brought in the army guys from New York who didn't know anything about that. So shipped them in there, and then they gathered them all up, and they took them off to Manzanar, I think it is. And then that was down by Yosemite, east of Yosemite, I think, in the desert. And then they were eventually brought up to a place over by Twin Falls, Idaho. Minidoka, yeah. And Dr. Kitamoto, who's that guy right there, he's a grown man, a dentist on the island now, and took care of all my kids' teeth. And he called me up one day and said, well, would you come in and talk about memorials, And I said, well, he says, I know you've done some because I talked to some other people. And would you come and talk to us about it? Just to talk to us so we'd know more, because we want to try to do something with it. And they were being sponsored by the Church Alliance of Bainbridge Island and Poulsbo area. All the churches said, we've got to do something to honor what happened to these people, the difficulty that they had to go through. And so anyway, long story, I went one night and talked to him, rushed home to get some rest before next work day. And a couple of weeks later, Frank calls me up and he says, well, you got the job, Johnpaul. I said, well, what job is that, Frank? I didn't come there to look for a job. And anyway, So I said, sure, I would help. And it was a volunteer effort that I did, and they paid for my staff to do a number of things. And there they are loading from the dock. On the day they were loaded, there was a dock there in Eagle Harbor, and this was on the south side of the harbor. And they came down this, they were staged up above, picked up on their farms, brought here or wherever they lived, and then all they could carry, and they went off on the ferry boat and then got on it, held in fairgrounds for a couple of days, and they had to sleep in cow stalls, and then they were took down to these other places. And then this was the notice that was being posted about them. So it was a tragic thing. And these are the guys, they had to walk between these guys with their bayonets drawn. So it was not, it wasn't a simple thing. It was very scary. It was tragic, is what it was. And so they asked us, they said, would you use this part of the street that was a dead-end street that went down to the water? And that's Eagle Harbor in the back, and that's where there's no longer a dock and stuff there. But they said, would you do something along that street? So it wasn't trying to do a wall, but we did all kinds of ideas about it. And then along one side of it is a huge wetlands. And the city told us they said, there's no wetlands there. Don't worry about it. There's no wetlands there. So we went out there in the evening, and the frogs were croaking like crazy, and the skunk cabbage was up. And I said, no, wait a minute. So I got the guy from the city and took him out there, and we found out that there was this huge wetlands that went along this whole side. So it's the frogs were talking to me. And this is an actual photo just to show you how it fits down in there. And then they wanted a small interpretive center as well as the wall to honor these people, as well as a dock to come out onto, but it wouldn't be a dock that you could really use, but one that you would use just to walk out into to feel how these people had to leave the land and go away from their homes. And so a little more careful drawing of it. This is the honoring wall right here, and the walk. And there's a drop-off here, and then you take a boardwalk and a bridge across the wetlands, which extends all along here. And then you come into the visitor center itself, and then you can come down to this and walk back out. And then there's a little bit of a road we put in to give people access to the beach, public access to the beach, and give a little bit of access to the center. This is a sketch of what it's going to be like. They said, we're American Japanese. Don't design us a temple, but respect our respect of wood and all that sort of thing. So it's they haven't built this part yet, but they've built the internment, memorial, the wall itself. And we gave them all kinds of options, and they chose this. And this is a picture of they do a lot of things to honor their people, and that some of it's little bells that the wind comes by and makes the bell ring. So some of them do these origamis, and sometimes they do other things. And so how do you allow people to be able to honor their ancestors? And some bring flowers. So where do you allow for that to set and do that sort of thing? So there was a lot of discussion about that and to determine this. And this is what it looks like right now. There's the wetlands on the right-hand side. And then this is the honoring wall, and it has a number of segments that go like this, and it's made out of cedar, and it has, up at the top part has some nice elaborate woodwork, but it's real simple, and they can walk along, and it's quiet, and as you walk along, you hear your feet on this gravel, and and people are quiet when they come there. They honor that. And basically, I thought that was really important to hear yourself moving and walking along. And you can maybe feel the tragedy and the scariness that happened to these people. And anyway, if you have a chance to go there sometime, it's really a neat place. They did terracotta work on the walls to put the names up. And it wasn't just the names. It was their age and their profession, what they did. So you could be more than just the name. It's what did they do in life, and that sort of thing. And then this is the kind of woodwork that went on up above. It's a really neat project. And then there's a few terracotta pieces about it, and then there's quotes, like these quotes about what people felt like. I think there was like 270 something that left Bainbridge. 100 and something came back, 140 or something came back. And it was all because of a local newspaper and the editor of that newspaper and his wife, who said, this isn't right. You shouldn't be doing this. These are Americans. You shouldn't be locking them up. And they kept on about that, and they got attacked from everywhere. But they kept it up, and they got a correspondence with people in the camps, and they kept up this wonderful communication with each other, and the people felt welcome coming back. Not everybody felt like that in the community, but a lot of people felt good about it. So it was a good place. So a lot of people come back, and we have a very diverse community there. There's a lot of Filipino people that live there too, because they took care of the farms and worked on the farms for these people. So we have a large Filipino community on Bainbridge. So, and then there's native people that live there because they worked in the fields too. They came down from Alaska and Canada and worked in the fields there. So it's a pretty diverse community. And then there's a plaque. I did the wall coming down, and then I broke it because it was all, their life was going along. And it was all about their life and their professions and what they were doing and raising their kids, and then the high schools and the grade schools and the histories that they all had with that, and then it just broke. And then this is an honored plaque for that time. And then the last piece, which is you'll see right there, will be about the Constitution and what the Constitution tells us about this. And those little places that you see right there, there's little poking out things. There's a lot of them here, but they're placed in the stone wall that come out, and you can set flowers on it. You can do whatever you want. It's like the Vietnam Memorial, where people leave all kinds of things. It's pretty amazing. So there's a lot of stuff that's left here. And they've set up a website. If you're interested, they have a great website. And so... Okay, the reach. Am I almost done? Okay. I'm going to go through this one pretty quick because this is not under construction yet. But this is a big scale thing. I mean, this is really big scale. This is over by Hanford where they did this kind of stuff. And then there was also the river. It's the only section of the Columbia River that's still free-flowing is around Hanford. It's the only part. The rest of it in this country is lakes. A series of lakes, or it's tidal influence, like up by Portland and all that. And it's also the corridor for lots of birds, like white pelicans and native people and salmon and pioneers and Indian people and the great floods that came down from Missoula, Montana, and all that. So the river is really an important place, but it's a designated national monument, the whole thing. It's this kind of country. Steppe, desert steppe, high desert steppe, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful place. And it runs from right here, which is up the north end of Hanford, and it goes all the way down to Richland, which is down here. And the real pollution that we all read about, that we're all paying for cleanup, is happening right in here, in this area right in here. So it's all managed, the wildlife, the land is all managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's a neat thing, but you can't get into it. You can't get into any of that right now because it's all still highly polluted. And eventually, when it's, our great-great-grandkids will get to go in there and be part of that. But what's nice is you can see the salmon, the water's shallow, and you can see the salmon coming up the river, and it's a wonderful place. So how do you design a visitor center to tell people about that and also have it respond to the important things that are part of the natural world there? And I'll just point out one or two here on this, then we'll move on, is that, see this, no, go back. This part right here. This is the visitor center. This is the parking, and then this part is probably the most important part of this project. on this land, animals have been moving across here for thousands of years, and they're really having difficulty now because of all the streets and buildings and all that sort of stuff. So that's one thing. And the second thing is if you go along on a boat along the Columbia River, it's those little canyons that are full of life, and that's where water is, and they're full of life and all that sort of thing. And so it's an important element of the natural world that needs to be brought into the human world. And so that's what that is one of those. And it's a long building that has to do a lot of different things. But basically, I wanted to just show you this to give you an idea. It's a space where you look out into the environment. You see the river, upriver and downriver. And on the other side, the buttes and the mountains all around there are sloped on an angle like that. And if you also go look at the dams, they're on a slope like that. So the interior wall, this interior wall is a tilted wall, tilted back, so that has some relation to the natural world out there, and people feel comfortable when we showed them the models of that. And it also created, at the bottom part, it created a lot of storage space and a lot of place for the HVAC to run. So, okay, now the first part is this part right here. Now this is an old drawing that this part, all these things, they drop away as you go along in the economy. And this part along here looks out into the Columbia River. There's a major interpretive center and a theater. It's all about native plants, native people, atomic stuff, and just everything going. Then there's a changing gallery. There's a restaurant and a gift shop. And the gift shop and the restaurant look out onto that stream, that wetlands, and all that sort of stuff that's there. So, okay, it's a butterfly roof. That's the big one back there. You can see it. These things have dropped off of the project. Turned out this was going to be the home for the Fish and Wildlife Service, but they didn't. They ended up, their budget got cut, so they're staying where they are. So these are living roofs back here, and then this is a big roof, and then lots of glass on the other side looking out. So it kind of looks like that now. There's the stream wetlands coming down, and people can sit outside because it gets over 100 degrees here. It's in eastern Washington. They can sit outside and be by that nice cool stream, and then they cross across that and go inside. So one last thing. I showed this last time, but I didn't have any final pictures to show you. There's a tribe in southern Colorado called the Southern Utes. They're very mobile people. They wandered all over the Rocky Mountains, and they controlled trade in their area, and they were wanted to do a cultural museum. And they, in the summertime, they'd go up into the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, and in the wintertime, they'd come down to this place called Ignacio. And they had a big wetland site that had wetlands around it, and they asked us to work on that site to design a building that looked at all those places but also represented their culture. And it had to do with the circle of life. They handed us a book, and they said, design a building to fit this. The circle of life was all about their circle of life. And so it was really great, and the students that I'm working with will see that. Here's the east-west axis, and then there was the north-south, and then the equinoxes and the solstices all had to be responded in this project, because they, in the spring, in the equinox in the spring, they have their bear dance, and then that's when they traditionally went up in the mountains. They still do the bear dance. And then they had their summer sun dance, and then they had other events that they did in the fall. And so they wanted the architecture to respond to that so they could talk about it. And this is the architecture. It's basically this side is the teaching part, and then this side over here is the museum or the exhibit part. And then this is the big welcome space, and the axis runs down through, and then the circle's completed by a trellis that goes around. There's the second floor. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but that's the east entrance. And there's a stream that comes down. People are greeted by a wetland stream, and it flows from here down that way. and it takes some of the roof water, but it also recycles and cleans it up. And then there's a walkway that comes into the big welcome center, and then there's an outdoor area. And then these are big bosks of like quaking aspen and others, so it's a very colorful place in the seasons. And they were people that used a teepee and developed a teepee extensively, and this structure tried to respond to that. This is the welcoming place, and I just want to show you some of that. That's the model of it. And then there's the real circle, and it's really kind of a fun project to be involved in. And people say, well, why'd you put all that stuff around it? Well, if you go look at a teepee, it's really kind of cool. A teepee in the daytime, and you're inside it, is really, the light's transparent, comes through the skin of the canvas. And then in the nighttime, if you have a lantern or a fire inside, it's glowing, And so those are the principles we wanted to try to work with. So the actual part back in here is glass, and it's translucent, but it's not clear. Only the top part is clear. And then, but we still had to put this on because they have such hot summers. So we had to, we had to pump more juice than you can imagine. This cut down quite a bit. So this is a lead silver building. So this is when you come in. This is up on the upper second floor, the welcoming space, and then that's the top part. And there are 4 sacred colors up at the top, and it's really kind of a nifty space. They have a library for their kids to do homework, to study in, to do research in. They have a big gathering space with big doors that go. These doors roll up and they can flow out into an outside areas where they have fire and smoke and all that. And it's a color appears again. It's really neat. And then they dance, and they have a lot of color. They're wearing fancy dance stuff. This is not traditional stuff here. Fancy dance is where they can really do some wild things, and they're doing it there. This is the boardroom. Everybody tells you not to do a round space because all the stuff focused to the center, right? Well, it does and it doesn't. You can work with that. And it was really fun to give them because they wanted their boardroom round with a round ceiling. And that's optical thing that's odd. But we took their symbol and got it into the handles of the doors to open. And it's really kind of fun. And then that's what it looks like now in the evening when you come there. That's superimposed over that. So now the last thing I just want to say is that the frog is... teaches us a lot. It's deep. We need to be deeply invested in the earth and everything we do, every architectural thing we do. And the sense of place, whatever you do it, is paramount in all the design. It really is. And without it, we don't exist. So think about that. Without it, we don't exist. And the frog teaches us that. This is at the National Museum of the American Indian. It's looking across the wetlands that we created for that site. And I just want to tell you a closing story, and then I'm done, is that you go there, and the main entrance is to the east, and it's at this part right here, and there's a big round plaza, and you go in. And when these frogs moved in on their own, we weren't even done with the pond. They were just testing it. And 2 days later or something, there were pollywogs. I mean, the frogs just showed up. I don't know where they came from. And they were there, and they've been there. And you go there in the springtime, and it is magnificent to hear all these frogs croaking. And it just makes life come around you, that life will never go away. It's always there. And if we help it with our architecture and design, it will be continued forever. So, thank you. I'm here every Thursday, Friday, and every alternate Saturday, so grab me. All right? As you see in Hawaii, all time.